vidíš to. Ne, neboj se toho. Pojď. No, vidíš to.
Hi, everybody. Does this feel random to you? It should, because that was 15 seconds of immersion, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So now when I got your attention, I'm going to introduce my dear guest, Professor Paul Zak, who's with me in here. We're going to talk about his recent book, Immersion, and we're going to talk about how you can engage your teams and employees better, and how you can get even healthier yourself if you apply the newest scientific knowledge or discoveries from the field of neuroscience. And I hope this is at least remotely right. But Paul, you're here to correct me. So what was remotely correct? What was completely off?
No, that's completely right. And so I think the business case here is we're running out of babies. Have you noticed? There's no more babies. So the whole world's aging. Even Africa will start aging in the next 10 years or so. So we've got to take care of the employees who are working and keep them working for us. And so really thinking about taking care of employees and maybe humans in general, their physical health, but also their emotional health, so that people can live satisfied lives and be productive at work.
Awesome. And the little tidbit from the book, your recent one, you have more of them under your belt, of course, was the 15 seconds to catch attention of people. So where does this come from, and how do you even know that this is a thing? I kind of intuitively feel that we cannot all know, but you're the scientist, you know why, and maybe you can explain it the way I could understand.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're interacting with others, when we're watching a movie, when we're watching an advertisement, we have found empirically that if you don't capture people's attention in the first 15 seconds, then you can't go to the next step, which is to get them to care about or emotionally engage with that experience. And so that attention plus emotional engagement, I've called immersion, a neurologic state in which you're present. You're like, oh man, I'm here, attentive. And I actually care about this. Can I use a bad word? One bad word?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So one of our early subscribers to the software platform Immersion called Immersion the give a shit measure. And that's about right? Because your brain just wants to idle. And so when we see this neurologic state immersion, it's metabolically costly. The brain is processing this information going, wow, this is exciting. But before I get to the emotional, it's exciting, I have to actually be attentive. And, there's interesting evidence now in the literature, scientific literature, that our attention spans are in fact getting shorter. We're being trained from, YouTube and video clips and Twitch and whatever. Everything's going to be short. And so, think of the opening of every Bond film you've ever seen, right? It's Bond running across a rooftop, bullets flying at his feet, and then saving some woman who's about to fall off the edge of the building. And you're like, if you watch that, your heart rate goes up, your palms sweat, you are attentive, because as social creatures, we share the emotions of others. And so in Hollywood, they call this a hot open. So I think for presenters, for trainers, for educators, we want to have a hot open, right? If you just go, hey guys, how's it going? Like, people are just like, oof. So Jerry Seinfeld, famous comedian, said this, like, the stupidest thing a comedian can do when he or she gets on stage is say, hey, how you guys doing today? Like, hit them with something hard right away, right? Get that brain engaged so that you can actually have that emotional connection that you really want.
Sounds cool. So I'm kind of hoping that people do give a shit about us and about what we're about to discuss here. If you do, and if you're watching us live, let us know in the chat. You should see comments on the right-hand side, maybe under the video, depending what platform you're using. And whatever questions you have, we're going to pick them up in a couple of minutes. So let us know, and we're going to go into it. But first of all, I have a bunch of questions myself. So Paul, we mentioned your recent book, which is called Immersion, and let me write a full title in here, which is The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. That's a bold title. So tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, and again, since we're allowed to use bad words, anyone who wants a question should include, bullshit in that question. So science is a way to get rid of bullshit, right? So anyway, Thanks for all the nice messages people are sending in too. My friend Kate there, Paul Her, thanks so much. Yeah, so as you know, I was on a 15-hour flight from Cape Town, South Africa to New York City last week. 15-hour flight. It's a long flight. You're trying to sleep and blah, 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 blah. And I had the most amazing flight attendant who every time he checked with me smiled. Oh, hey, your ice cubes are watering in your Diet Coke. Let me refresh that for you. I'm like, I would just drink it. Like, I don't really care. And they say he loved his job, right? So he made this 15-hour, kind of exhausting flight wonderful because he really enjoyed it. So many of the experiences we have, like in travel, like in training, like at work sometimes, are just dull or mundane or, it's just not interesting. And so we all know, at least intuitively, that we'd like to have extraordinary experiences. And so for the past 15 years, I've been measuring brain activity in about 50,000 people while they have different experiences to identify the neural signals of extraordinary. And given those 50,000 observations, then the book lays out in a whole bunch of different areas, from marketing to employee experiences to customer experiences to advertising, how important it is to create extraordinary experiences, because that's when the brain is really kicked in, as I said earlier, and you get this, valuable impact. But because we have so much observations, then you don't need to measure necessarily. I can kind of derive implications on how to do that. So, concrete example, one of our public longest subscribers to the Immersion platform to measure extraordinary experiences is Accenture, public big professional services organizations. And by measuring the corporate training that they offer their employees, they spend $1 billion a year on corporate training. They have found that people cannot stay immersed in new content for more than 20 minutes without a change. So they have broken their training down into 20-minute modules. So if I say that, maybe it sounds intuitively valuable, but that's a data-driven statement, right? So they do 20 minutes. No one presents for more than 20 minutes. And then there's a change. And then they do maybe table work for 20 minutes. And there's a change. Then they maybe debrief each table. They've also found that they need to put in longer breaks to sustain immersion over the course of several hours or a day or whatever they're doing, because just like muscles fatigue, neurons fatigue. So if I'm asking your brain to invest this high metabolic energy in being immersed in this new information, in this training, then I've got to give you this refractory period to recover. So again, we have learned, you and I have learned, and everybody else listening has learned how to sit in a chair for 8 hours or 10 hours a day. We're trained up on that. That doesn't mean because we can do it, that it's the best way to acquire new information. So breaks important. And then the last part of that title is on happiness, and we'll talk a little about healthspan today as well.
Awesome. Well, Paul, I actually know enough about you to understand what you mean when you say measure, but I want the audience also to know, because it's not measure like Robert De Niro in Meet the Parents. I'm the human lie detector. That's not what you do, right?
Right.
You really measure in a way that's, I guess, beyond what most people can imagine after that. It's not like you are giving people questionnaires, you are asking them how they feel. What do you actually do? What do you mean by measure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're actually measuring neurologic activity. So the original funding for this research about 15, 16 years ago came from the U.S. Department of Defense, which under contract tasked us to identify combinations of signals in the brain, that would accurately and consistently predict what people would do after a message or an experience. So they asked us to build a neurologic prediction engine. And so I did personally about 10,000 blood draws, look at changes in neurochemicals to see what people did after we gave them some information or some experience. Then we measured those neurochemicals, tell us where to look in the brain and the peripheral nervous system. We find this brain activity, the electrical induction that is caused by this change in neurochemicals. And then finally, we found out that we can get really good signal by actually grabbing data from the brain's output file, the cranial nerves. These cranial nerves pass through the heart. So we can use a standard smartwatch or fitness sensor and wrote code that lets us infer what the brain's doing second by second for this neurologic state I've called immersion. Again, this sort of give a shit measure or valuation measure for social emotional experiences. So it's software that's measuring second by second how much your brain values that experience. And as we said earlier, the more you value it, the more you want to keep doing it, the more you create a craving to repeat it. And further, which is really interesting, and that's where the happiness comes in, when I stretch my brain, when I have this really peak immersion experience, it begins to train my brain to be present and to be more emotionally open. So we have published research showing for individuals who are deeply immersed in watching a video or watching a movie, they also have better relationships with their family, with their friends. They live healthier and they live longer. So I think from a business perspective, businesses have almost a sacred duty to create extraordinary experiences, not only to increase customer lifetime value. I want to keep coming back and doing this thing, but actually to improve people's health and happiness. How about that for a claim?
That's pretty bold. That's pretty bold, I'd say. And we're gonna go to that, I'm sure. And by the way, I kind of understand why you decided to name your book Immersion and not give a shit. Although I will get it anyway. But let's talk a little bit about what it actually is, this factor, and why do we care? Because some of the stuff you mentioned, I do understand. I mean, I do a lot of event design, structuring agendas with stakeholders. You wouldn't believe, or actually maybe you would, Paul, believe how difficult it is to convince the stakeholders that they need to put breaks into their events. Because we need to cram as much content as we can, right?
We're going to be so efficient, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. We can't waste time on breaks. But when we're looking at the outcomes of the events, then of course the breaks pay for themselves. That's basically exactly what your research suggests, right?
And humans, socialize, and so part of that socialization is building real connections with your colleagues at work, and that facilitates greater teamwork and communication and job satisfaction. So, famously, Steve Jobs, when he was helping design the headquarters for Pixar, wanted a single entrance and a single set of bathrooms. So they do have a single entrance. They want to have, these people bumping into each other and have those random conversations. They didn't have just a single set of bathrooms. It's a big building. We don't want people. Men will talk in the bathroom. Maybe women do too. I don't know. I haven't been in a women's bathroom, but there are other places to have conversations. So a lot of new businesses will have, Wi-Fi. They'll have couches. They'll have snacks. Google is famous for this, but lots of other places as well.
I mean, I know about his anecdote, and I've learned that he got a lot of hate for the idea of one set of bathrooms everywhere. People are pushing back a lot. But let's talk about the immersion itself, because we kind of took for granted that people understand what we mean by that. So I want to talk about what immersion actually is, and why do we even care about it? And let's start with your flight from Cape Town. So you mentioned, long flight, attendant, 15 hours in there, and he was able to kind of treat you the way that you felt taken care of, and maybe there was this factor in there. I wonder, we talk about this flight attendant smile, right? Can you fake this? Can I just can I be immersed, or can I kind of lure you into believing that I care about you? Or would your data about immersion also reveal this?
This is such a great question. So you can usually fake it on one or two interactions. If the flight attendant really doesn't care about his job or me or whatever, but human beings as social creatures are very sensitive to not unconscious cues. And so if that flight attendant, I'm going to see him a lot over those 15 hours, I'm going to start picking up unconsciously that he's just kind of, whatever, going through the motions. So we've actually got published research that shows when up to $500 is at stake and people have to talk about how to share it, like, oh, we should split it, whatever. So there's a famous show in the UK called Golden Balls that basically did this, where people would negotiate and you make a promise, and then separately you have to make your decision. So that's basically what we did in this experiment. And yeah, of course, everyone says, oh, be nice, I'm going to share. And a third of the people took all the money. But those people who were lying had physiologic responses that we could measure with instruments that people, couldn't pick up consciously. Now, what the coda to that, which is really interesting, is it turns out that you can fake it till you make it. If that flight attendant, if that customer service agent, if that trainer just pretends like, hey, this is the most exciting thing for me, then eventually their brain goes, this is the most exciting thing for me. So, you start to convince yourself that this is actually true. So this is why we have false memory. So as you know, it's very easy to plant false memories in people because once it's in your brain, you go, well, it must be true. It's here. So it's not so bad to fake it till you make it if you're trying to learn how to do something.
All right. So I see we have some questions, from Monica, from Kate, and a few more. So thank you so much for them. We're gonna pick them up in a minute. Just the last thing, because I already put it on the screen. So what is immersion and why should we care? You kind of define what it is. Is it a lead indicator of something that we care about? Is it connected with health? Why do we care?
Perfect. So that'll take the next 45 minutes to do that. So, so we care for a couple of reasons. One is, as I said, we all want, as customers, we all want extraordinary experiences. As learners in training, as students, we'd like to have great experiences. So, as you said, Alish, immersion is a leading indicator of the value that the brain places on this experience, and that value comes from the emotional response. So, when that value is high, the brain says, oh, this is important information. So it's actually saved in memory in a way that makes it more easily accessible. So I mentioned Accenture earlier. Accenture has found a very strong positive correlation between immersion and training and information recall weeks later, right? So immersion is a leading indicator of goodness or value or importance to that individual. So once we have this universal measurement tool, which we have, and we'll share at some point with viewers, then it allows us to then ask and effectively A/B test, right? So if Alish does training and Paul does training, same training, different delivery, which audience got more value out of that? So I can begin to optimize that. That's what Accenture has done.
Sorry, Paul, it's gonna be my audience. But yeah, we can measure it.
No, what's really interesting is let's think about those 3 dimensions we can control. So the first is let's focus on training, but it could certainly applies to customer experience and all that. The first is the customer ready to have that experience? And so that readiness to actually be immersed is like the theater lights in the movie theater coming down, right? So I call that psychological safety. So we also develop this measure of psychological safety to assess whether you've actually created the conditions for immersion. So bring the theater lights down. So make people comfortable. Make sure they, again, use the bathroom, offer them a cup of coffee, a drink of water. So we always want to be efficient. My dear friend Kate said, effective is more important than efficient. Yes, Kate, I totally agree with you. So I want to be effective. So I want to just take a little bit of time, just like with breaks, and make sure that individual or that group of individuals is comfortable. So readiness to learn. The second is how I structure the content. I mentioned the sort of 20-20-20 rule. Think about 20-minute segments, open, hot. Tell a story. Storytelling is the most effective way to immerse individuals and sustain immersion. So human scale story with conflict, with a crisis and a resolution from which we can learn. That's the standard story structure. And then lastly, how I deliver it. So as you know, I'm a very dull person. I'm very boring to talk to, but Alish is super exciting, fun to listen to. And so again, if we deliver the same information, Alish is just going to get a better immersion response because immersion is contagious. So think of 3 dimensions, just to summarize. Is the audience ready to learn or individual? How do I structure the content? How do I deliver that content? And here's something real interesting. So research that we published soon from my lab, we have shown that if you measure immersion in a salesperson in a luxury retail store, you can predict with 86% accuracy which customers buy. Right? Because if the customer's having a great time, the salesperson's having a great time. And that shared immersion says, holy crap, I want to stay here. In fact, the methodology between that is that the more immersed you are, the longer you stay in the store, and the longer you stay, the more you spend, which makes perfect sense.
Wow, now I'm thinking about my last experiences in the store, but I'm not going to share this one because we have a lot to cover in here and questions are rolling in here. So, Paul, I'm going to pick up Monica Borow's question, which showed up first. Let me put it on screen. And Monica is actually asking about the health effect. So I'm going to read it out loud. So Monica's asking, can I get immersed in a video game on my phone? But I'm not sure if it's healthy. I can get immersed in a video game on my phone, but I'm not sure if it's healthy for me. Can you speak to this? Yeah.
So the term in medicine is a dose response relationship. So some of that entertainment is really useful. And the world changed so much with phones. Like I can't even imagine brushing my teeth without watching something on my phone. Like why can't I take 2 minutes to just chill? But now I have to bring my phone with me. So again, we may have a shortened attention span. So some of that video game, sure, great, gives your mind a break. It's certainly immersive and it's active. But if you're the criterion in psychiatry is if that video game play is causing you to not engage in life in the other aspects, not talk to your friends, not have a meal, right? Then it's interfering with your activities of daily living, and then that's not healthy. So some is good, too much is bad.
Would you say, like beyond this, Paul, that there's something about overstimulation or overimmersion? Is it like is it like a muscle? Is it like a battery that could be drained when I'm playing a video game for too long? And as during my break, maybe then I want to get back to work. Am I kind of too depleted to do anything else? Well, everything looks duller, as if I put too much salt in my meal, and then in comparison, everything pales.
It's such a good question. I think I have a partial answer. I don't think I have a full answer. And one is we do get fatigue, as I mentioned earlier. So if I'm using my break to play 15 minutes of a video game and then I want to go back to work and think I'm going to be at full energy, I'm not. So I do want to have some real neurologic breaks. So immersion again is metabolically costly. It's burning calories. It probably won't help you lose weight, but it's burning a lot of calories, and the brain runs on oxygen and sugar, glucose. And so if you're burning up oxygen and glucose, then you're depleting it, at least temporarily, for could be minutes before you're actually going to be back at full speed. So same reason why they say, don't have a big meal before an exam or something, because you're going to get some blood flow that's going to be diverted to the stomach. Now, your brain is privileged. You're going to get plenty of blood to your brain as well. But that's just heaviness. Your body's doing something else. So a little bit good, but too much bad. But really think about breaks. What we found in the data is that if you have a non-stimulus break, take a walk without music, without headphones, if you do something that's completely different than you do, movement is really great to refresh yourself. So taking a walk, play with a dog, call a friend, do something kind of chilled out, as opposed to really deeply immersive, which is just going to burn some energy.
Got it. All right. Thank you for the question, Monica. Thank you for the answer, Paul. I'm gonna move on to the next one, which is actually related to your book. So there is a question in here from Juan Carlos, who's asking about the subtitle of your book. So I'm going to bring it on screen again. I'm going to say the subtitle is The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. And Juan Carlos is asking, are there certain personality traits that are associated with higher level of happiness? So here's the book we're talking about. Get it. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere. Sorry, back to you, Paul.
Thank you. That's a great question, Juan Carlos. Thank you. There are personality traits associated with greater happiness. So let's talk about two different approaches here. So one is happiness, which is this sort of acute state, like how happy am I right now? And I'm going to show you my data in just a second. And the second is kind of long-term life satisfaction. Are you flourishing? Are you thriving? So we call that satisfaction with life. So let's talk about happiness. So happiness correlates very strongly with neurologic immersion. So now we have a tool. We can measure that objectively second by second. And it turns out that people who are more agreeable and more empathic for any experience will have higher immersion. They're going to enjoy it more. They're more emotional. They're going to get more value out of this. And those personality types have this bigger acute response. It turns out they also have longer term life satisfaction for a different reason. The reason is that a lot of our life satisfaction, at least the parts we can control, is due to the value of our social relationships. And people who are agreeable and empathic are warmer individuals, and they sustain greater friendships. They have deeper friendships. And so those friendships, because of their personality type, are richer, and therefore they get more life satisfaction out of this. So I'm going to summarize that in a slightly different way. So about half of our lifetime satisfaction, our satisfaction with life, is due to genetics, roughly half. The other half is due to primarily 4 factors. And you know about these because you guys are reading and you're smart. It's sleep, exercise, diet, And the last is the value of our social network, having a rich social network. So sleep, exercise, diet, easily measurable, standard stuff, that you can all use. What we've done in the last month is bring a measurement tool to the market for free so you can measure the quality of your social relationships and to use AI to give you goals to build up what I call emotional fitness. That is the strength of these relationships. So when life kicks you in the gut, you've got that social support network built up around you. And I think that's going to be a valuable component to helping people live longer and happier lives. So health span is the length of time that you live a healthy and engaged and a thriving life. And so if I want to extend my health span, which I think all of us would like to do, yeah, diet, exercise, sleep for sure. And the fourth is invest in those social relationships. So even weirdo nerd introverts like me can invest in those relationships. When I got back from my long trips, I had happy hour with some friends I hadn't seen in a long time. And man, we laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought, how lucky am I to have four super close friends that I can spend 2, 3 hours at a brewery and have some beer and just laugh our brains out and talk about books and talk about life and all that. It's really, really valuable. So it turns out that loneliness literally will take years off your life, and having a rich social network is more important to extending your health span than is quitting smoking. This is how important social networks are, right? So again, don't smoke. I'm not saying you should smoke. So getting the value from that is really, really important. So anyway, that's such a deep question, Juan Carlos. Thank you for answering it, asking it so well.
Got it. So basically, if I get it right, even if we are, let's say, born pessimists, we still have like 50% control over the results, at least.
Exactly. And you can modify that. You can learn to be slightly less pessimistic. A lot of that is again the people you're around, right? If you're around people more optimistic, more forward thinking, less stressed out, then you can get there. So there's my data right now. So that smile says I'm getting more value from this conversation with you, Alish, than I am at baseline. And my background, I'm getting a little frowny. I'm getting back to baseline. The background is my psychological safety. So I'm a little bit stressed. I'm in winter. I'm not in fall or summer because I'm talking. I'm energized and all that. So that's okay. But the cool thing is that we have this ability now to measure this and look at my data, every day and have goals. So those are my goals I've had every day, and I'm getting close to meeting my goals for emotional fitness. That is having enough social emotional engagement to build up that support network, both neurologically, but also socially. So we socially regulate our emotions. And so having those people around us who care about us, who we find important to us and vice versa, is super important. So again, I can spend, Alice, you've known me for quite a while. I can spend 12 hours in the lab, not talk to anybody and be really happy because that's my personality. But I have learned from my own research and from reading that I need to actually hang out with people and spend time, and it's improved my life substantially. I think I'm a much happier person. I'm certainly a nicer person because I'm getting all that care, love, whatever you want to call it, from other people.
I guess you are. Mary is saying, "Hi, Paul, you're amazing." So
Thank you, Mary.
Now I want to see your numbers. If they are jumping up.
They gotta be. Look at that. Yeah, where are we at? Oh no, I'm frowny. I don't know what's happening to me. Give me a second. I'll reset.
That's
I
so
don't know why
good.
I'm
That's so
low.
good, I guess.
Is that again that psychological safety? So I'm focused. I'm expending a lot of energy, and that's burning my ability to be a little more immersed. But I'll come back to baseline.
Awesome. But I see we may have jumped some steps because Monica is asking, to summarize, is immersion a measure of connection between two people? I think I misunderstood immersion. So if I get it right, it's not just that, right? It's about the experience. You can be immersed in, you know what? I'll shut up, Paul. You explain.
No, you're right. So immersion seems to be the brain's general valuation mechanism for social emotional experiences. So that could be a measure of connection between two people. So Alice, you're wonderful, and we've hung out in England, and but if my daughter comes in the door, I'm going to have more immersion talking to her than talking to you because I'm indexing the value of connection. But if I watch a movie, I can be deeply immersed in that. If I play a video game, I can be deeply immersed in that. And so that's a sense in which immersion helps to stretch or train our brains to be better connectors. So that's the really cool and exciting leading edge research that I'm sharing in the book, which is if we have enough of these peak immersion moments, and again, our app builds up, gives you goals to do that, then you're training yourself to be present, to be emotionally open. So for me, spending 12 hours in the lab, I did that for many, many, many years. And honestly, my social skills really declined because I just wasn't around people enough. I was just working all the time. And then now that I'm, older and smarter, hopefully, and I'm investing in relationships, then those social skills are getting better and better. And so, again, I think I'm just a more pleasant person to be around, certainly more caring. The downside is also I suffer more, right? So when my friends are having something's wrong with them, then I start to share that pain. And so there's a downside to being more empathic and more connected, which is, you are positively and negatively affected by the emotions of others.
So to bring it back to Monica's previous question, technically immersion from a video game that she mentioned earlier could be a competition to an immersion in kind of organic social interaction. And is there anything in the data that would allow you to distinguish one from the other when you're taking the measurements, or is it the same thing essentially?
It seems to be the same thing. So again, I think it's that dose response relationship. Some of that video games are really engaging, and again, help train yourself to have that emotional connection to characters. There's evidence that carries over to your real life, right? That you learn how to be more connected. This happens particularly in people who are neurodivergent, right? Where it's a little harder maybe to connect, or you may be introverts like me in real life. We're just not used to it. And so, video games can help us train that. Again, what I don't want to do is have the video game be the entire immersion experience I have, because then I'm excluding the bigger bandwidth I get from meeting people in person, the touch, the smell, the eye contact, all that stuff that shares emotions with other people.
Is that part of the future challenge you've been mentioning at the beginning? Not enough babies, stuff like that. I'm thinking now about I believe it's 2013 movie Hair with Joaquin Phoenix, when he basically started dating, a phone app, right?
Yeah.
And it was just better, more immersive than human interaction without all this mess. So is there a risk that this is going to happen?
I wrote an article more than 10 years ago for Psychology Today predicting that people would eventually fall in love with robots, humanoid robots, once they have, chatbots, which we have now, that, we very difficult to distinguish from humans. And if I have a female chatbot voice and she's always nice to me, and sometimes my wife's grumpy and she's a little bit mean to me, and, why not just talk to the chatbot? Why not just avoid my wife? So these connection systems are so blunt. I mean that in a technical neuroanatomical way. They activate so easily that falling in love with a AI bot or with a phone operating system or a humanoid robot is really to be expected. Think of dogs. My dog's lying down here, and we say, "I love my dog." I love my dog. I mean, when that dog dies, it's going to be awful. It's a freaking weird another species. Why am I quote loving? Because that's what we do. We spend a lot of time together. I get emotional feedback from that dog and vice versa. I'm petting it, I'm rubbing it, right? It's giving me somatic feedback. So all that really means that love is realistic. It's from the animal's perspective, our perspective, physiologically, I do love that animal. Again, maybe not as much as my kids, maybe not as much as Alish, but there's real love there. And that's super important from a health perspective.
Oh, there are so many questions I have now, but I don't want to go into the field of speculative philosophy because we have more questions in here. So there's a question in here from Kate. I'm going to bring it on screen. And the question is, what do you find to be the biggest distraction or impediment to immersion?
Hello, dear Kate. Send you a kiss. Kate's an old friend of mine, good friend of mine. Biggest is tough to say. I mean, well, we developed this measure of psychological safety because neurologically, when I'm stressed, when I'm anxious, that inhibits my ability to be present and emotionally engaged. And so, really thinking about those factors that draw our ability to be present and emotionally connected to an experience or other people, any of that will do that. So, I'm not sure what the biggest distraction is, but anything that takes my neural bandwidth away. Makes it better. Again, I think the movie theater is the best example, right? You watch all the trailers and then the lights come down. They say turn off your phones, and we're creating this multisensory experience so that you can really enjoy that movie to the fullest. It's different than if you're on your screen at home on Netflix and the dog's barking and whatever. It's still enjoyable, but it's not as immersive. And that's what we find in the data. So I think avoiding distractions in general, if you can, is quite useful.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you. And I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the app you mentioned. You showed us that you have it running on the screen. So tell us a little bit about it. What is this app about? What does it do? And how is that related to the topics we are talking about: the health span, the immersion, engagement, or sales in the stores? What's all about it?
Yeah. So what we found in this, 15 years of research is that when people have a sufficient number of peak immersion moments, that again they kind of expand their brain. That leads to happier, healthier lives, so longer health span. So awesome. If that's in the lab, it doesn't help anybody, right? Socialize more. What does that mean? And with whom? And doing what? So yeah. So we spent about a year and a half, last year and a half, building this app because we have, as I said, 50,000 brain observations plus, we actually can find benchmarks to give people goals. A ring, just like you have a ring to close for steps, there's a ring to close to have enough peak social emotional interactions. So as I think Monica said, that could be hanging out with my kids, talking to my friends. It could be watching a movie. It could be playing with my dog. Right? From the brain perspective, those are all very similar activities. Playing video games, I'm going to get lots of value from all those experiences. But having a goal, and then also this syncs to your calendar. So, what are the best parts of my day? Right? Where should I spend my time? With whom should I spend my time? All that I think is really useful. Thanks for putting up the QR code in the link, Lish. And so it's free. Anybody can use it. It's being rolled out in worldwide in a number of organizations. So businesses will pay for anonymized data. If you are an employee and your employer invites you to use this, then they're going to see emotional wellness, which again, because we're running out of babies, is really important for their workforce. They can assess wellness interventions to see if they're improving emotional fitness. But for individual consumers, it's absolutely free. And I think knowing your own emotional state, maybe not second by second, probably you don't need to know that, but looking at that over the course of minutes, hours, days, and really getting a sense of what are my best times, what are my worst times, where am I getting so much value? And again, this is emotional fitness system is just like physical fitness, right? So I went to the gym this morning. Why would I do that? Well, I like it, but I'm staying physically fit because I'm stressing my body. And so, as I said earlier, emotional fitness immersion is a metabolically costly response, but it builds up that capacity to be fully connected, to be fully immersed in experiences and in people. And that's what we really need to live longer and healthier. So feel free to try the app, you guys. Like I said, it's free, and learning about your own emotional state is kind of weirdly addictive. And so anyway, there's like I don't know, half a dozen wearables that we support, and there'll be more currently. So we do pull data from a smartwatch or fitness sensor, so you need one of those. But give it a shot.
Cool. So I'm gonna give it a shot. I just need to get the proper tracker
Didn't I give
because
you? I brought you some when we were in England. Didn't I bring you some of those
you
Scosh?
did. I had them somewhere, but honestly, I was looking for them in the storage because I'm using a normal Fitbit, and this is optimized. I guess most of the stuff is available on American market, but
If
I'll
you
find
can't,
it.
if you
I'll
can't find
find
it,
it.
I'll send you another one. No worries.
Oh, I'll get it. The same thing. I'm gonna put a Google link as well from Google Play Store for some of you Android folks in there.
Android's not out yet, so that we're about a month ahead, away from Android. So sorry,
Oh,
it's not in the
really?
Play Store.
Okay.
Yep. So it turns out you always build the Apple version first, the developers tell me, because it's harder, and then it's easier to build the Android one. So go Google.
All right then. So there's I see more questions in here. I've seen one from Monica, and no, actually,
Can I do Deb's question? Hi Deb, my friend
of
Deb
course.
also. She asked if drinking alcohol impacts immersion either way. So yeah, it's a great question, Deb. Hi. We have tested that, and we have found that a little bit of alcohol tends to increase immersion. So it diminishes your brain's kind of break on being emotionally engaged. So that's 1 to 2 drinks. But we have published research showing that 3 drinks or more. So that's a general topic. But in the published research, we calibrated this to your alcohol content in your breath. And so, women metabolize alcohol slower than men, and bigger people metabolize it faster than smaller people. So much more control. But in general, 3 drinks in an hour, then you're actually diminishing your ability to be present. And so, right, that's the alcohol diminishes the activity of the prefrontal cortex. That's why people get disinhibited. And so, yeah, so 1 to 2 good, more immersion, and more than 3 not good. And also, by the way, more than 3, we find people become very uncooperative. Deb, you've been to bars. I've been to bars. You know those people who get very cranky and uncooperative and nasty. So even in experimental settings, when we get people a little bit drunk, they don't play nice with others. Yeah, big surprise.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, Paul, despite what we like to think about ourselves, you said love is kind of a simple emotion. So if this is suppressing our inhibitors, maybe you can fall in love at a bar, and then regret.
Exactly right. That's the 2 a.m. fall in love.
Okay, we have something deeper in here from Juan Carlos, so let me put it in, and maybe we will need to wander into the field of philosophy anyway. So Juan Carlos is asking, as technology continues to evolve, do you think there are ethical considerations that need to be addressed when creating highly immersive virtual experiences?
Yeah, absolutely, Juan Carlos. I'm with you. I think that once we create virtual environments, particularly those with haptics, so I'm going to get feedback, the brain's not going to differentiate between that virtual world and the real world. It's the same reason, like, not me and Olish because we're too macho, but I've heard that people occasionally cry at movies. Deb, I'm talking to you. Right. So why is that? Right. So flicking an image, maybe it's immersive, but like you begin to share the emotions of the characters on the screen, fictional characters. So that just shows how subtle the impact is, or how kind of universal the impact is of these immersive experiences. So if I can create that great experience, then I do want to have a out switch. And so again, I think I'll use the criterion of psychiatry. If that virtual experience is inhibiting your ability to thrive outside the virtual world, then I think it's it's damaging. So I do think we want to limit this. Same thing, by the way, with the immersion data. These that are private to you, if we share them, if you choose to share them with your employer or your insurer or whomever, you can do that only because there's a benefit to you. But these data should be kept private because it's your own emotional state, and maybe you don't want to do it. On the other hand, and we haven't done this yet, but I'm imagining this. I've been married 27 years, Olish. So occasionally when I come home from a long day, my wife is cranky with me. And in my head, I go, we all do this. Oh, this woman, what? Why did I ever marry her? Now, I don't say that because I'm a nice person. I'm suppressing it. But what I don't know is what happened to her that day. So if she chooses to share her immersion data with me, and I get an alert on my phone saying, hey, your wife had a really bad day today, pick up dinner, pick up flowers, try to be a nice person, as opposed to a tired, cranky person, right? Think how much better your relationships would be. So I think there is some level of sharing or creating either virtual or actual environments in which I can improve that. Even imagine traveling. If I'm traveling and I can have a virtual interaction with my wife that feels kind of like a real interaction, and then strengthen those ties, how great would that be?
I'm just wondering now. You made me think how I can be a better person, and which is deep. So I'm gonna bring it back closer to the surface and kind of pivot from the question of Juan Carlos, but still stay in there. You mentioned crying in the movies. guilty as charged. And I was wondering, and I'll keep the Juan Carlos, I'll keep the question, of yours on the screen, because ethical implication of, let's say, development, or I'm going to say overdevelopment of this technology and its misuse, they are here. Now we are in the weeks when Oppenheimer is in the movies, so new interest in that. My question for you, Paul, is does it really is this really in the future? Because I'm crying at the opening of the Pixar movie Up. There's this opening sequence, animated characters, pretty rudimental, right? It's not immersive, it's not humanoid robots. And still I'm getting emotional response repeatedly. I can go with something as simple as a smiley face and it gets emotional response.
Sure.
We don't need, advanced AI drawing features. So, and you mentioned earlier, Paul, laugh is a
I'm so happy with
emotion.
this statement, by the way. I'm loving what you're saying.
Huh, look at that. So are we there already? I mean, is it actually simple to create immersive experiences? Is it actually something that we are considering to be harder than it is? Are we already there?
I think, like every good question, the answer is yes and no. We've been doing this forever. So I think, we originally developed immersion. The basic research was funded by the U.S. Department of Defense to enable soldiers to be more persuasive with communication, right? So the idea was to use words rather than weapons to encourage people to cooperate with the U.S. military. And I think that's a very noble endeavor. And I want to thank the U.S. taxpayers for the millions of dollars they spent, funding my lab. So we've always done this. I think what's different vis-a-vis what Juan Carlos said was now we have technology that allows us to do it much, much better, right? Before we were kind of winging it. So I live outside Hollywood. So for the past 30 years, 80% of Hollywood movies have lost money. How's that possible? Because we're going on intuition. The director likes it. The producers like it. Liking is not the same as having an impact on an audience that puts butts in chairs, right? This is a different component. If liking worked and we just asked if you like it, and everything would be a hit. So we need some other way to get at this. So same thing with creating valuable, emotional, social experiences. Right now we have this technology that almost anybody can use to create extraordinary experiences. Should we be doing that? When we worked with the U.S. government, every 6 months we met with a bioethicist to discuss how this should be deployed and how it shouldn't be deployed. So for us as a company, Immersion Neuroscience, we have a do not fly list. We don't work with governments. We don't work with politicians, right? There's a bunch of other people we just are not going to sell our software to because we think it is important and valuable, and we don't want to give people some unfair advantage. If candidate from party A used our technology to make better ads and candidate party B didn't use it, that seems like it could affect society. So I do think we should kind of keep a lid on this and continue to have, as Juan Carlos has opened up, these ethical issues that are really important. I think what a valuable component here is, again, sharing with our loved ones, sharing with a clinician for say individuals who are at risk of mental health disorders, and all that I think is super valuable and helps the individual human. But once we talk about societal effects, I think a much larger conversation should be had on that.
Thank you, Paul. And I'd like to wind down with something a little less bleak for now and maybe actionable. So to have this peak experience nearing to the end. So I was wondering for people who are listening, who are actually watching, interested in creating more impactful experiences for their audience, be it during presentation to their teams, maybe to their managers, being, as I do, designers of events, trying to put together maybe a training, workshop, conference. What would be, let's say, 3 ground rules or tips you would give us that we should all implement or keep in mind when doing that?
The first is make people comfortable. So we've all been in rooms where it's too cold or sometimes too hot. That's burning metabolic energy. That's going to take away from being immersed. So first of all, make sure people are comfortable. Have them come in, have some snacks and coffee. The second is opening hot, right? I want to get you in right away. And what we find is it's better to do shorter intensive sessions instead of an 8-hour session. Do 2 4-hour sessions, or do 4 2-hour sessions, right? Think of breaking this up over multiple days, or at least have long breaks in between. By the way, the brain consolidates information overnight. So when I do workshops, I generally do a 4-hour afternoon with lots of breaks, give you homework, have you sleep on it, and then the next morning do another 4 hours, and then let you help that information get categorized in your brain. So that's the way I like to do it, rather than 8 hours altogether, which is just too much for most people, even though, again, we can sit on our butts for that long. So make them comfortable, open hot, storytelling. Storytelling. So all my friends who are on there or sending me nice notes, you all know that we have tested hundreds or thousands of different presentations, ads, movies, and that story structure, human scale, illustrates the key point. So you still may want to have the technical information, the accounting information, or the GDPR or whatever you're training people on, but start with a story that has an individual who illustrates why this information is going to be valuable or solve problems, because we all understand storytelling at that very human scale. And as you probably know, almost all the professional services organizations, because I've worked with most of them, McKinsey, Accenture, PwC, they have professional storytellers that work with their consultants. They have understood for at least a decade, because I've been helping them for at least a decade, that story is a very effective way to communicate information and have that information stick in brain. That's immersion, right? Stick in memory. So again, you still need to have the technical work, if there's technical work there to share. But if you start with a story, if you lead with a story, you're going to have much more impact.
Thank you so much, Paul. And it is time to wind down for sure. You are everybody in luck, by the way, because I'm doing this every week. You can find me on LinkedIn or wherever else you want. This stuff is also on YouTube, but LinkedIn is my weapon of choice in here. And next week, we actually have a session where I'm going to talk about, surprise, surprise, how I'm using storytelling in designing the upcoming business conference, and how did we weave it into highly specialized business content. So if you're interested in how you can do that with something that looks boring on the surface, join next week, same time, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Paul, how about you? If people want to get more from you, except from buying your books, getting the app, anything else you want them to do?
Sure. Get the app. You can find out all what I'm doing at getimmersion.com, immersion with an I, and happy to engage with anybody. And also, I'll be there next week for the storytelling. I want to know what you've learned as well. So I think these kinds of meetings are a great way to share information with people who can use it and deploy it in effective ways, subject to the Juan Carlos criterion of, don't do evil, which I think is really important. So getimmersion.com, get the free app. And I'd love your feedback. If you're here, then you're somehow a superstar, interesting human, and I'd love to hear back from you. So, Alois, thank you so much for the honor of spending this hour with you.
Thank you for showing up. It was amazing and very immersive for me. So if you like this, put us some comments. We're going to look at them and go through them later as well. And if you want to share this for later viewing, this is going to stay forever on YouTube, LinkedIn, and other platforms. And there's also going to be audio on my podcast in case you want to recommend it to somebody who likes listening to stuff in their car or other places. So that's all from us today. Thank you. Have a lovely rest of the day, everybody.